Hi folks, this video will be a little bit different than normal. I'm not going to try to sell you a tractor. I'm not going to demonstrate a tractor. I've had people ask me to do this for quite a long time, and I've always been apprehensive. This video is about who we are, who I am, and where I came from and where the company came from, and you know what's this all about. And I've always been apprehensive about doing this. I don't want people to think I'm, so interested in myself that I made a video about it. But if that's your take on it, please just go to the next video. There's plenty of stuff on YouTube that's interesting that you may like better. This is for the folks that asked about me and asked about the company, asked who Larry Stovesand is, and so that's what this video is about. I'll probably shoot it over the next couple of days, or maybe I'll break it up into several videos. But I ask for either your indulgence or, watch something else. I don't want anybody to think I'm a blowhard, because I'm not. Yeah, for those of you that know me, I'm just pretty mild-mannered, normal, and I'm not full of myself. I hope nobody would think that. I was going through one of my old desk drawers the other day, and I ran across this log, and I hadn't seen it in years. When we first opened, there were two employees, me and Jim Wilcox, who's now the service director for both stores and the store manager for Murfreesboro. And the next day, Jason Buchanan as a technician. Well, Jason Buchanan, now 10.5 years later, is here, and he's our senior master tech. But that was it for a long time. We did everything ourselves, including I did, the paperwork and stuff. This was the original deal log. I'd go month by month and record, every time I sold something, every time the store sold, a tractor or whatever. And because I was the only salesperson here for years. And I looked at January 2015. That's the first month we opened, and we sold 3 tractors. I'll never forget the first deal. And I'm like, well, we're a tractor dealer now. And I remember the guy. He bought a RX 7320 cab. Stock number, and our stock numbers are sequential, starting at 100, T100, T for tractor. He bought T100, and now we are on stock number T4520. So 4,500 tractors later, but this book means a lot to me, and I will never let it out of my sight. It's kind of cool. So my name is Mike Schramke, and with a good Polish German name like that, you probably can imagine I'm not from Nashville, Tennessee. My first 41 years were spent in St. Louis, Missouri. That's where I'm from, and I'm a city boy all the way. Now I'm not, but for the first 41 years of my life, I was in the city. And that's all I knew. I didn't know anything about tractors or, farms or rural or anything. What got me from there to here is a long journey. My mom had been in the car business for many years, comptroller of different dealerships, and her friend, and oftentimes they worked at the same dealership, and for years they worked at one in particular. Her friend Larry Stovesand was generally, everything from a salesman to a sales manager, general manager, whatever, and mostly in the Ford business. When I graduated high school, I'm not going to college. It was 1981, and I know most of you think that was a long time ago, and in fact, it was a long time ago. I graduated in 81. In 82, I got my first job in the car business. Well, I had always washed cars. So ever since I was 16, I worked in auto dealerships, washing cars or sweeping up or whatever. But my first sales job was in '82. I was 19 years old, and at a Ford dealership. I sold cars and managed general manager, sales manager, whatever, for the next 30 years. Well, about 15 years ago, and I'm still in St. Louis, by this time, Larry Stovesand, I'm going to tell you who he is. Larry Stovesand was a guy that I had worked with. He was always a boss. He was my boss when I was like pushing a broom or washing cars. We never then sold together because by that time he had his own dealership. There was a program back then called Dealer Development, and if you were somebody that Ford recognized as somebody that might be able to be a dealer, and be a good dealer and sell a bunch of cars, they'd tap you on the shoulder and they'd help you get into business, help you get a Ford franchise, and they did for Larry Stovesand. It was in Paducah, Kentucky, so he moved his family to Paducah, Kentucky, and opened Paducah Ford, a little bitty store in an old building in downtown Paducah. He sold Fords and, as a footnote, Ford tractors. Back then, in some of the rural areas, the Ford dealers sold Ford cars and trucks and tractors. So when you went to the store, the front line actually was a row of blue tractors. I'll never forget that. But eventually, when they moved to their current location, that's about the time Ford was kind of New Holland, and then New Holland, and it became, Ford got out of the tractor business. So then he just sold Fords. He picked up other franchises. Got Lincoln Mercury, Mazda, Buick, Pontiac, which is no longer, there, GMC, and 5 years ago, maybe, he bought a Kia dealership in Illinois. So he's got a few dealerships in Paducah, Kentucky, and one Kia dealership in Illinois. But anyway, Larry was always like a mentor to me, whether we worked together or not. He followed my path of selling and managing and whatever. And Ford asked him if he would like to have a Lincoln Mercury dealership in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, yeah, of course he would. So he started doing whatever process is involved in that. And he contacted me and said, I'm going to get a Lincoln Mercury dealership in Nashville, Tennessee. Would you like to be the general manager? And I said, oh my God, I moved from St. Louis to Nashville, and I think I would like Nashville. I mean, Nashville's cool, and I had no idea how cool it is. But so my wife and I talked, and we're like, yeah, let's do this. And that was fortunate, as it turns out. We moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and we worked at a city dealership, Larry Stovesand, Lincoln Mercury, and for several years, great. And then Ford dropped Mercury, and so it was a standalone Lincoln dealership. So it was getting a little tougher. We were still selling cars, selling a lot of used cars, and selling Lincolns, but we, having taken a whole brand away from us when they stopped making Mercuries or stopped selling Mercuries, it got different. Well, eventually, this town had too many Lincoln dealerships. I mean, how many could you possibly need? So Ford negotiated with a bunch of Lincoln dealerships nationwide, and either bought them out or whatever, and they closed up, and that one did. That was in 2008. 2008 was also, I don't know if you all remember, but it was a terrible time economically. It's when the real estate market crashed, and all the banks and Bernie Madoff, and I mean, it was a challenging time, and so they closed. We closed, I should say. Excuse me. I became a sales manager and then general manager at a Ford store in the kind of periphery of Nashville, a suburb. And, it's cool. It's going along great. And that boss, the guy that owned that store, he bought a Mahindra tractor for his own farm, and he liked it. And he's like, I wonder if we could sell Mahindra tractors. So he got some space. He rented some space down the street from the Ford store, and he was going to do Mahindras. And I said, "Ooh, that sounds fun." I said, "Let me run that." And he said, "Well, you don't know anything about tractors." I said, "No, not at all. But I can sell." And so, okay. So, he took a chance, and next thing I know, we're selling Mahindras, and we were selling quite a few Mahindras. And it was fun. I realized that selling tractors was a whole lot more enjoyable than selling cars would ever be. Folks that come in, and I say this all the time, folks that look at tractors, folks that come in and shop for tractors, it's like shopping for a puppy. It's fun. Everybody likes shopping for a puppy. Everybody likes puppies. Everybody likes tractors. And so the whole dichotomy of the salesperson and the customer is different selling tractors and cars. Cars, when you step out of your car at an auto dealership and you start walking around the lot and you see a salesperson sneaking up on you, it's uncomfortable, and it's automatically a feeling of an adversarial type of a situation. You're like, oh, geez, and the salesperson's like, oh, geez. Tractors was none of that. Tractors was fun. People shopping for tractors were fun. I liked them, and so I got bitten by the bug. As it turns out, I started recognizing the product wasn't so great, but I was sure having a lot of fun. I eventually went to and by the way, in somewhere during that time, I hired my brother-in-law, Jim Wilcox, my wife's brother, to be the service manager because he had worked he also had worked at the Lincoln Mercury store, and I knew he was aside from the fact he was my brother-in-law, he was actually a good manager, and so he became the service manager there. Well, eventually, I started thinking about, I think I'd like to do this, away from here and, at an ownership level. So I started looking at brands, and I heard about a New Holland dealer, of all things, that was going to be for sale. The owner was going to retire. And so I went to my old friend, Larry Stovesand, and I said, Larry, we need to get in the tractor business. He goes, oh my gosh, I was in the tractor business years ago. I said, I know. And did you enjoy it? He goes, oh yeah, I loved it. I'd take a tractor to my farm and, tear it up, bring it back, and the techs would fix it. And by the next weekend, I was back tearing it up again. I said, yeah, it sounds fun. I said, I heard of a New Holland dealer that potentially is for sale. So I said, you've got money. I don't have any money, but I can sell. So perhaps we could somehow form some sort of partnership, some sort of alliance. I'll run it and sell and make the business go, but I don't have any money to start it. So that's where the original idea came from. We were looking at this. We got together, and he came down here to Tennessee, and we walked around, and we were looking at this New Holland dealer, and they had a Kioti franchise as well, and I had never heard of Kioti. Maybe I did, like in the periphery, when I was selling Mahindras, but I didn't know the brand at all. I assumed that it was just some off-brand that they happened to keep. And I remember they had 2 Kiotis on the lot, and one had a flat tire, and they were filthy. And I asked the owner who was selling, I said, "What's with the 2 Kiotis?" He goes, I supposedly am a Kioti dealer. He goes, I don't even try to sell them. He said, the New Hollands do great, and I want nothing to do with them. Tell you the truth, none of my salesmen don't try to sell them. Nobody tries to sell them. And I'm thinking, whatever. I didn't put much more thought into it. So we were trying to buy that, negotiating and back and forth, and getting with New Holland Corporation, applying for franchises and whatever. And I I remember then I started looking online and learning more about Kioti. And I'm like, okay. And I was reading some of the, the Facebook clubs and things like that, the Facebook, groups. And people really liked the product. And I learned that it was South Korean. And it just kind of was starting to itch on me a little bit. Well, that deal fell through. New Holland had us jumping through all their hoops, and we did. And then they gave the franchise to a guy that worked for New Holland corporate. Yeah, so that's where that went. And of course, I was devastated. I was crushed, and I thought, oh, life is over. This, that was going to be it. And life has a funny way of sometimes, something will fall apart, but whatever is next around the corner is actually a massive improvement. Well, all along, I knew I would hire Jim Wilcox, my brother-in-law, to be the service manager or whatever. And we were all kind of half excited about this. When it fell through, we were devastated, and him too. Well, he said, "What was that orange tractor there?" And I said, "That was Kioti." He goes, "What about Kioti?" And I said, "I don't know, man. I don't think anybody knows about him." And he said, "That's not necessarily a bad thing." And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, if we had a brand of tractor that was good, we still had to find out if it was a good tractor. But if we had a brand of tractor that was good and we knew it was good, and nobody around here has ever heard of it, nobody had preconceived notions, good or bad. Was it a good tractor? Who knows? Was it a bad tractor? Who knows? The potential customers in this major market wouldn't have feelings either way, and I can work with that. Well, it turned out that we learned it is a good tractor, and so I went back to my old friend Larry Stovesand again, and I said, "We need to sell Kioti tractors." He goes, "What? Who? Kioti?" He goes, "That's Chinese?" I said, "No, it's Korean." "I don't know, man." And I said, "Yeah, think about Hyundai 20 years ago. Think about Kia 5 years ago. This was 10 years ago. So, I said, LG, Samsung, Daedong, Bobcat, which is now owned by a Korean company. The Koreans are a manufacturing dynamo. And the more we thought about it, and he was hooked when I said, think of Hyundai 20 years ago, because I sold cars when Hyundai started to trickle in, and we all laughed and we all snickered. Oh, that guy bought a Hyundai. He couldn't afford a, fill in the blank, Toyota, Ford, whatever. That's what we thought. And then when Kia came along, same thing. Oh my goodness, they couldn't afford a nice car. They bought a Kia. Well, nobody's laughing now. Hyundai and Kia are dominators in the automotive industry. Can you imagine how Honda or Toyota now feels about Hyundai? How many Accord sales didn't get made because people bought Hyundai Sonatas? It's, and I wanted to be part of that type of a movement. We tried to find locations and whatever, and eventually I threw up my hands. I was out of steam. I threw up my hands. I said, I'm done. I'm going to go back into the car business, and I'm done. Tractors was just a pipe dream. And Jim Wilcox, he wouldn't let me off the hook. He's like, no, you can't just stop. He said, you've got something. This is going to be something. We live, if you're not from here, you don't know where I'm talking about, but at the time we both lived in Gallatin, Tennessee. He said, I found what I think to be a perfect property in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So it's out of Nashville, but they touch, how big cities kind of grow together. LA and Long Beach, they kind of become one. And that's what Murfreesboro was, but it was in no way close to where we lived. It was probably 70 miles. Well, it still is. It hadn't moved. And so I'm like, oh my God, Murfreesboro. He goes, yeah, but it has nothing to do with where we live. It has to do with where people will be when they want to buy a tractor. Murfreesboro is at the center. It's at the junction of every interstate in Tennessee, and it's a boom town. And so I went and looked at it, and I'm like, wow, yeah, the place seemed huge at the time. It was a former forklift dealer. And so it had tall doors in the shop, and it had what I thought to be a large parking lot and 10,000 square foot building. And so had Larry come and look at it, and he's like, well, yeah, this place looks great. And I applied for a Kioti franchise. That concludes chapter 1. We'll start chapter 2 as soon as I check the battery and make sure that I'm still filming.